I'm going to start with this. In order for us to arrive at good, helpful policies about what the world should do, we have to start with a proper understanding of what's happening. So I'm glad that you called our panel today the Iran Revolution panel. And this is what I want Western institutions, Western policymakers to understand about what's happening on the ground. This is not a call for reform. This is not a call for disbanding the morality police or getting rid of the hijab. This is a total revolution. And I want the viewers of this to understand, I'm not equivocating. This is a revolution to overthrow the Islamic Republic. So once Western policymakers understand this point, I think a lot can follow from it,
Sure.
right? So once we recognize this, and once we recognize that the cause of the revolutionaries is just, and we recognize that the regime that has occupied Iran for 40 years is a menace to its neighborhood and it's a menace to the world, then I think policymakers can begin to pull out all the stops, just as we saw Western policymakers can do very quickly when Russia attacked Ukraine. It was incredible the speed with which policy can get implemented when there is political will. So what do some of those policies look like? Well, first of all, I think Eli touched on this a little bit. There has to be communication between Western leaders and credible opposition leaders. Some of those opposition leaders are in Iran. Some of them are outside the country. But I think it's fairly clear who they might be. And I think all of us can probably come up with a list of 5 to 10 names that Western politicians ought to be talking to. Western intelligence agencies ought to point out the corruption of Iran's leaders, Iranian officials. How much money have they stolen? Where are they? Who has their families living outside the country? And embarrass them and cause outrage in Iran. Rightfully so. I mean, Iranians are rightly outraged that they can't pay for, to put bread on their table and feed their kids. And yet regime officials are living it up in London and Washington and Toronto and elsewhere. The other things that they can do, I'm wearing a shirt from the PS 752 Association. This is the Achilles heel of the Iranian regime. This is one of the most obvious crimes that they've committed. And the international community, my own country, Canada, has been dragging its feet on this. Take the Iranian regime to the International Criminal Court. It's a hard case to make. I'm a lawyer. I understand that. But the international community came together very quickly and took Russia to the International Criminal Court. And if there was political will, they can do that as well. And finally, the recommendation I would make is that the Iranian regime has existed for 40 years, and especially the last 15 to 20 years, thanks to the help of collaborators and, frankly, what I would call Vichyites, people that collaborated with the Nazi regime in France. Those were called Vichyites. We have Vichyites that live in North America, and we have them that live in Europe. We need to identify these people. We need to keep records of what they said. We need to embarrass them. We need to make it costly for them to continue to be a mouthpiece for this regime, and they need to know that their time is up. That's what we need to do.